Hey everybody! So welcome to this class on making ramekins. Ramekins are cute little individual portion-sized bowls. You can use them to bake in, like lava cakes or mac and cheese or creme brulee, or you can just use them for really cute little bowls. Now, while I'm going through this class, I'm going to talk a bit about what makes certain clays better for baking with versus other clays. There are some things that you want to take into consideration. Now, you might notice the background's a little different. Usually you just see what's happening here, right? Nice, pretty pots all finished. Well, if you've been following along, you know I'm working on this huge project for the National Veterans Art Museum Triennial. It's this great big exhibition, happens every 3 years, and I've been invited. So I decided not to make just one piece. I made 96 hand-carved plates that are going to hang on a wall that'll be about 17 feet wide, 12 feet tall. So it's a huge wall installation. So because I decided to do that huge project, I needed to put up a temporary working solution. So these baker's racks that I have behind me are fabulous for that. And after I finish this project, the plan is to move them around the studio to where my kilns are and everything. But while I'm working and slab building and making all these plates, it's just much easier for me to be able to roll out a slab, reach back here, grab a board, put a plate on it, put it back on the rack. So you might see this in a few classes, but not too many, because they're going to get moved back out. Although, I don't necessarily mind seeing work in process behind me. It's just, it clutters up my gallery. So it's got to go. All right, so back to business. We're making this ramekin, and let's get started, and I will show you all you need to know to make these super cute, sweet little ramekin dishes. So here's a close-up of my ramekin so you can get a feel for it. There it is. And oh yeah, daisy pattern. That's one of my line of gorgeous textured rolling pins that I designed, which of course you can get on claysharemarket.com. Woohoo! So I'm going to show you how to make this ramekin, and I have my clay right here. Now this happens to be Laguna 90, which is a type of clay that is, you can notice, a beautiful brown when fired, and it has grog in it. So it has these gritty particles. So if you think about clay, you think about how some clays are really fine and tight, like porcelains. Some clays are gritty and more open. And this means they allow for thermal expansion a bit more than other clays. So clays with grog in it tend to do that. So I always encourage people to use groggy clays, so that's the gritty clays, and you'll feel the grit in your hands when you are working the clay. So here's a bit of the groggy clay, and you can't really see it. Sometimes you'll see the flecks, but you certainly feel them when you're working with it. And they're not uncomfortable. It's just not as smooth as, say, B-mix or a porcelain or a terracotta clay. So I've rolled out a slab. I've used a couple pounds of clay. Now I'm going to suggest if you make these, don't make just one. Because if you ever make lava cakes, and you're just not going to bake one, you're going to bake like 4, right? And even if you eat all 4, which I'm not judging, you can eat all 4, but it's just easier to make 4 of them than just to make 1. Plus, you'd rather have them. All right, so I've rolled out a slab of clay, and this is about 12 inches by, I don't know, 18 inches. That's not really the relevant part. What you want is you want a slab that is, I would say, 3/8 of an inch thick. So it's kind of thick, but you want that for bakeware. You want it to be strong and serviceable. You don't want dainty, thin little pieces going in your oven. All right, so once you roll out your clay slab, you're gonna smooth out the surface. Even if you've rolled it out on something that didn't leave behind a texture like mine did, you want to go ahead and smooth it out. So I'm just doing that. Now, I do use canvas, although I'm looking into other options because canvas is not the best choice, only because it holds all the clay and creates a lot of clay dust. So now we're gonna flip it over. I'm gonna reach out, grab it, flip, just like that. So this piece is a bit bigger than I need, but that's because I want to make more than one. So I'm just using my rib. Do you see I'm just smoothing? And it doesn't really matter what direction you go in. You just want to compress it and smooth everything out. We're not trying to stretch the clay out. We're not trying to make this slab bigger, but we just want to compress it and get it ready. Okay. So for the ramekins, they're slab built. Here we have a slab. And I'm going to add some texture. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. There's no rules in adding texture. I just love texture in my work. And if you look at this one right here, I just think it adds a little something to it. So I'm gonna add texture. And what I will be using to add said texture is this. You can tell I used it on B-Mix last. Look, there's some clay still caught up in it. I didn't clean it out. I should have, but you know what? I'll just quickly do it now. Don't judge. I'm just gonna clean it. There. Ta-da! All right, so this is my daisy rolling pin. I love it on just about everything right now, but of course you could use anything you want, another different pattern, rolling pin, stamps, or nothing at all. So we're just gonna roll our texture in, and it's super simple. You just take the rolling pin, and we are gonna go ahead and roll it straight across the clay, just like this. Ta-da! Rolled. That's it. It's done. And if you want to, and scooch this over a bit so you can see, you can even line up your edges and roll again. Yes, it will create a little seam, but I don't find that distracting. I think it's cute, so for me, it's not a big deal. Now, if you want to have, this rolling pin doesn't really have a direction. You can roll in any direction you want, but if you wanted to, you could roll in the other direction. It's entirely up to you. So once you get your texture on your slab, we're gonna flip our wear board here. So I'm just using a piece of 3/4 inch birch plywood as my wear board. I have a bunch of these in the studio. I use them all the time. They're really great and handy, and they're available at any hardware store, so they're not a fancy thing. You can get them anywhere. So I'm gonna release my clay. You notice how wet it is there? That's because it stuck down when I was compressing it and when I was rolling my texture in. So here's something I wanna give you a little tip here. When I roll out my clay, did you notice how wet it was? It's really, really wet. That means the clay has a lot of water in it, so it's very floppy. And sometimes when you're working with floppy clay, it's a little difficult. So you can always let this set up for about 15 minutes if you need to, sometimes 30 minutes. You don't want it to stiffen up to leather hard, but what you do want is so it's not so wibbly wobbly like that. So we're just gonna jump right in with our ramekin. I have a 4.5 inch cookie cutter. This came out of a set, and I'm just gonna cut my bottom. And I want texture on my bottom. If you look at my finished one, you'll notice, let's see if I can turn it, there you go, so you can read my stamp. So I put the texture on the bottom and I have texture on the sides. And the way I sign these pieces when I do this is a little different than my other pieces. I use my chop or my stamp, which you can see is right in there, right there. But if I wanted to sign it, I could. I could just smooth out some of the clay and have an area to sign. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut out my bottom. So remember, 4.5 inch. Just line it up in an area I like. Press down. Oh, did you hear the grit? I can hear the grit in the clay when I do that. And then pull, look how sticky it is. The 90, the redder clays tend to be really sticky. So there's our bottom. And I'm just gonna sit it on a wear board. Now, if you wanna go ahead and stamp your signature on it, you're going to want to do that now, because once we put it together, you're not going to be able to stamp it. It's going to be not possible. So let me grab my stamp over here, and I'll actually show that to you. So it's a little hard to read. I've had this one for about 15 years. I don't know if the camera can pick it up, but it's just one I hand carved. Just make sure you carve it in reverse, because when you stamp, it flips everything. So I have my bottom. I'm going to find an area to stamp over here, just like that. There. Ta-da! It's mine. That's my piece. All right, so now we're gonna flip it over because we want the texture on the bottom. You could texture the inside of your ramekin. It would be very cute to do so, and I have done it. But for this particular project, I'm not gonna. So we're just gonna set this to the side. So that's on my banding wheel over there. Now to make our sides, I measured some ramekins that I had to get the dimensions for this, and I just allowed for shrinkage. This size I'm giving you will give you a ramekin approximately this dimensions. It could go bigger, could go smaller, but remember, it's individual portions, so you don't want to get too big. So let's actually measure this. So finished dimensions on this. Inside, I would say, is a 4 inch, and outside, let's just see, and about 2 inches tall. So it's about a 4-inch diameter and about a 2-inch tall wall. So that's what you'll get. And that's a good sized individual portion. Alright, so for the walls, for our ramekin, I took a piece of craft foam and I cut a strip 2 inches by 14 inches and I wrote on it ramekin, because if I don't write ramekin on there, I'll forget. I will not remember. I'll be like, what's this blue strip for? Yeah, ramekin. So you see, I rolled out this big slab of clay. And you notice I only cut out one bottom, and I'm going to cut out one side wall. But I could cut out 2, 3, maybe 4 bottoms. And I probably could get 2, maybe 3 side walls. I might need another slab of clay. Definitely could probably make 3 ramekins from this. Make it a little bigger, you get 4. They're not a big thing. So we're just gonna lay this in an area that I like the pattern. I'm just gonna hold it down lightly. I'm using my Dolan 220S. So the S means straight. They have a 220C, which means the handle's curved. So the S is a straight handle, the C is a curvy handle. Easy to remember, straight, curvy. So we're just gonna cut top and bottom, straight across. Relatively straight. If you get off a little bit, it's fine. And I'm just holding the knife straight up and down. I'll just move my hands along so that I don't lose my place. And then we're going to cut our sides, and for the sides I hold it at an angle and I'm just going to hold my knife like this and cut, and without changing the angle I'm going to come over here and cut. So if you follow along in my classes, you know this is pretty standard. This is how I always make my cuts. But if you're new to me, if you're new to me, or I'm new to you, then, you know, you might not know that. All right, so I'm just gonna take this strip out of the way, and here's our side wall, right there. All right, so I don't really need the rest of what I've got going on here right now. I can move this to the side a bit, and I'm gonna grab my banding wheel. I need like little music while I'm moving things around. All right, so here we have our banding wheel with our bottom upside down. I'm going to bring you in close so you can really see what's happening. And we're going to go ahead and slip and score. So I just have off to the side here a cup with slip made from the same clay I'm working with. And yes, I do have cups for every different kind of clay I use in my studio. And if you decide to do that, you might want to label your cups somehow. So you can keep track of what slip is where. But I do encourage you to have slip for each different clay. Because if I used a white porcelain slip on this really rich brown gritty clay, it would not be good. They are not such good friends, so we don't really want to mix them up. So I'm using a serrated rib. That's this guy right here. And I'm just scoring my edge. And then I'm going to take my strip of clay that I just cut, and I'm going to stand that up, and I'm going to slip and score the edge of that as well. Now this might be a little longer than we need, and if so, we'll just trim the excess off. It's not a big deal. Flip it over, line it up. Oh yeah, we got plenty. So I'm going to start back here, about the middle, and I'm just going to line this up. So I'm just going to use my fingers on the inside to lightly press it out till it lines up, and then my finger on the outside to just help scooch it along, get it where I want it to be. Alright, so this right here, this side is good. This side is going to be a little long, so we'll be trimming this side off. So let me get this side all lined up. So I made a 2x14. I could have probably done a 2x13.5 strip, but it's okay. You can trim this a little bit off. It's not that big of a deal. So I'm just going to line this up. Just like that. Normally I will have this turned towards me and I'll make my cut like this. Just like this. Let's see if we can do it and you all can still see it. So I'm just going to line up right here and I'm just going to cut down. Just like that. remove that bit of clay. And then I'm going to go in and slip and score this right here. And then we're just going to take our overlap and we're just going to compress. So I support it from the inside with my hand, and then I use my fingers on the outside to kind of roll it up. And that's how I seal all of my slab built pieces. And then we'll look at this seam here. We're just going to cup it, hold it with the base of your palm, and you're going to compress and roll. And I'm actually rolling outwards, not up, because I want to spread this clay out. And one of my favorite tools to use for that is this little baby red rib. And we're just going to blend this seam away. I don't mind seeing the seams. If it bothers you, you can just keep blending it until it's gone. It's not a thing for me, but I understand some don't want to see the seams. So hey, you can get rid of it. And what often happens when you slab build, you get a little bump right here. Little teeny bump. So I take my knife and I just go scooch right across. Just like that. Take care of it. It's done. So for the outside, I want to make sure I've got it lined up. I'm just going to use my finger and I'm going to spin this on my banding wheel. And my finger is basically laying nail down. I'm going to spin it all the way around. And then I'm going to turn it so it's facing in. Turn my finger so it's facing in. And then turn it a bit so it's slightly angled downward. See how I just did that? And I just turn it all the way around at least once. And what I've done is I've sealed the outside. Now, if this was a cup or something I was going to use not in the oven, that's all I would want to do as far as sealing the seam. Well, I would go in with a soft bristle brush and I would, smooth this all out because that needs a little smoothing. But because this is going to go in and out of an oven and be subject to thermal expansion, I want to do a little more. So I am going to put a little coil on the inside there, just to give it a little protection. And I have got my clay still over here, and you remember that big strip we cut off? I'm just going to grab that. I'm going to move this a little bit over. Toot toot, just like that. And then I'm just going to squash this up. So we need a coil, not a big coil, 1/16 of an inch thick maybe, little. So let's roll this out. And here's a little thing I'm going to teach you about rolling coils. So you think when people are rolling coils, they're rolling both out and back, that they're putting pressure on the clay when they roll out and when they roll back? No, they don't. You put pressure when you roll out, you're just pulling it back. That's all. You're not really putting pressure when you come back. All you're doing when you come back is just pulling it towards you. So basically, all of the pressure on the coil is happening on the outward roll, and you're just pulling it back. See? See? Pulling it back. Roll, pulling it back. So if you have trouble keeping your coils nice and round, try only putting pressure on your coil when you're rolling away from you. I think it'll change everything for you. It'll change your world. I promise I won't sing. Well, maybe a little. Alright, so I've rolled out this coil. Maybe it's a little thicker, maybe it's more like 1/8 of an inch. It's okay, because we're going to squash it in and it's not going to matter. So let's just roll this up. So I just want to make sure I have enough. So I'm looking at my coil and I'm looking at the diameter of my ramekin, and we're good. So pull everything back over here. I'm going to take my slippy water, take my little brush, and I'm just going to goop some slip around in there. This clay is pretty wet. I don't really have to worry about slipping, scoring the inside to get it to join. This coil is going to stick like it was meant to be. So I'm going to trim a tiny bit off. Now I want to start my coil so that the seams don't line up, meaning the seams on my ramekin and the seams where my coil is going to join are not in the same place. So this is my seam for my ramekin. So I'm going to take my coil and I'm going to start it a little ways over here, just like that. So I'm going to press, and I'm not going to press outward, I'm going to press down at first. So I just want to join it to the bottom, And you notice how I'm supporting with my hand on the outside. Because if you press too hard, what will happen is you'll actually press outward and you'll just like destroy your ramekin, and then we'll all be sad together. No, you'll just squash it up and start again. But, you know, I don't want that to happen. So, see how I'm just scooching it around? I know it might be hard to see. Ramekins are small. So it's hard to film things when they're small. Alright, that's the end. We're just going to pop this clay out. Ooh, let me grab it. Just like that. So you see what we got going on down in there? We're going to blend this in. Now, I'm just going to take my finger and I'm just going to blend along the bottom. So I just want to get rid of those finger marks that I put in there. And I'm really pressing it more towards the bottom, not to the side yet. But we're gonna slowly work up the side, and you'll notice some of the clay already is scooching up the side. So just keep going. It might take a little while. That's okay. This isn't a race. Making pots is very much a slow and steady thing most of the time, and it's supposed to be that way. If you find making pottery stressful, then you need to change up how you're making, because it's not supposed to be. Not at all. It's supposed to be a joy. Yes, there are learning curves and there are some frustrations, it happens, but mostly overall, it should be a joy to be in the studio. Alright, so now I'm just going to take my finger, I'm going to use my pad of my finger, and I'm just going to smooth that coil into the sidewall. And I'm using my outside hand to really support it because it'll try to stretch out. And then I'm just going to let my finger kind of go up the wall. I'm using the side of the finger here. So I'm just shaping now. So we're just shaping this ramekin. We're basically done attaching that coil. Any areas that I see that need smoothing, I will just go in and smooth out with my finger. Looks pretty good. That's pretty good there. Alright. So I'm just smoothing the inside a little bit. So I'm happy with that. Now if we look at it, so it's a little bit wider here than it is here. You could let that stay. You don't have to change the angle. Or we can go in and stretch out a bit so it's a straight-sided ramekin. So right now we have a ramekin that angles inward at the top. If you want a straight-sided ramekin, all I would do is take my little red rib here and I would just go around. See these short little smooth strokes? And I just do this to angle it out just a bit, just to get that straight-sided ramekin. And you can even use the curved side if you like that better. Alright, and sometimes the tip of your rib will make little marks and you just want to smooth those out. Alright, so we have a nice join here where the wall and the bottom, the floor, meet of the pot. So we don't have to worry about having any issues as far as thermal expansion causing cracking here when it's going in the oven. Because that's a real thing, and you definitely don't want it to pop or blow up or anything, because that would make everybody very unhappy. So now we're going to go ahead and smooth the rim. And you can just take your fingers and do this little pinching motion, and you can just take damp fingers and just smooth out the rim. And that's often how I smooth my rims. Now, groggy clay doesn't like these yellow pottery sponges. They don't get along. So they like, look at, this is a white mud tool sponge. When they dry out, they shrink up. They come tiny and they come very flat. You put it in water, it absorbs the water. It gets really big. It's like a little fun thing, right? But then when you're not using it, they dry up. They shrivel up into these tiny little like sponges. Weird. I can't even think of what they look like. Sort of looks like a potato chip. But you put it in your bucket of water, which I have right here, and you wiggle it around for about 5 seconds, and then it fills with water, and voila, you have a really nice wiggly sponge. So these sponges work really well on all clays, not just groggy clays, so you could just use these as your pottery sponge. They're a finishing sponge, so look how nice. Look at this. It's so smooth. It's beautiful. How easy is this? Right? And then if you want to go back in and round the edges a little more with your fingers, you can. And then go back with your sponge. But these sponges are my favorite for groggy clay. Any kind of gritty, groggy clay that you're working with, these sponges are the best. Now, what happens when you use other sponges is it brings the grog to the surface, and then you get these little bumps, these little gritty bumps. And that's not nice, especially when it's going to be foodware and you're going to be baking with it. You wouldn't be very happy. So at this point we could flare our rim out a little bit if we want to, but I think I'm just going to leave it kind of straight-sided and just have it as is. And there's really not anything else that we need to do as far as the making part. You want to let these dry. If you notice that you have a lot of clay here that you need to smooth away, I don't, but what I sometimes will do is I will take a wooden clay knife like this, and I'll put it up against the bottom and I'll just spin this around, and that will create a little bit of an undercut. But this one seems to not need it, so I'm just going to smooth that join one last time, because I want to make sure everything's good. And the making for this ramekin is done. So I think we should talk a little bit about glazing and using these, because it is for ovenware or bakeware, and that is a whole different type of pottery than most people are used to. So I'm going to chat with you a little bit about that, and that'll be all I have for this quick little class. Alright, so I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about using your bakeware, and we'll just talk about glazing a little bit. So the glaze I used here was a glaze called Textured Turquoise, and that is from Amaco. It's part of their Potter's Choice line. Fancy, right? It's a really great turquoise glaze, and when you put it on dark clay, this is 2 coats, it really lets the texture shine and the clay shine through. Now, I have done it with 3 coats, and it looks spectacular. It's even more turquoise bluey, so yes, bluey is a word. So you could totally put 3 coats on, but I did 2 because I wanted to do it light. Now what I really wanted to show you here is these are the same size, right? Well, before and after, right? Before it's fired, after it's fired. So with the Laguna 90, it's going to shrink up a bit. It doesn't have a huge shrinkage rate, but it does shrink, as you can see here. Ta-da! So let's talk about the ovenware clays and using ovenware. So when you make your own pottery for the oven, you want to make sure that it has some grit or grog in it, right? You can always check with your clay supplier. They will tell you if it's safe for ovenware or bakeware. Yes, you can use finer clays like porcelains and B-mixes that are not gritty and groggy, but they might not last as long. So to get the most out of what you've spent all your time making, you want to use a clay that's designed for the oven to be baked in. Now, when you use your handmade pottery, there's a few different things to remember. One is you don't want any thermal shock. That means hot oven, cool pan going in hot oven, that's a shock. So you don't preheat. It's fine, I promise. I've been baking with my own pottery for years. You do not need to preheat your oven for most things. So when I bake pies, when I bake cakes, I just make what I'm making, put it in my dishes, turn the oven on, put them in the oven immediately. So don't preheat. The other thing is when you take your hot, whatever you made, out of the oven in your handmade pottery dish, don't put it on a cool surface. So if you have a granite countertop or a marble countertop and it's a little cool, just put it on top of the oven, because that's usually warmer, right? And it'll be fine there, you won't have any problems. Also, don't put hot dishes in a cold sink of water, because that also causes a little bit of shock and is not so great. So commercially made wares can handle thermal shock a little more than handmade wares. That doesn't make them better. It's just you need to know how to use them. And I go over this in great detail in some other bakeware classes that I have. But in this one, I just wanted to give you a little lowdown on it. Now, these don't have to be baked with. They are cute all on their own. So you could just make them because you want to make a super cute little dish. If you're just starting in pottery, this is a great introduction class. Maybe you've been doing pottery for years and you've never made your own bakeware and you want to jump in. This is a good class to do that with. You know, gives you a little toe in the water, see if you like it. I have to tell you, the first time I started making bakeware, and like the first year that I had all my own bakeware for Thanksgiving, and I took everything out and laid it out on the table, and all the pots were my pots, That was pretty awesome. I felt great. Now, you might not want to make all of your dishes, but maybe you just make your own little ramekins. Give it a try. See how you like it. Alright, so as always, you can find me on clayshare.com with all of my classes. Hundreds of classes, thousands of hours of video. You know, follow me on Instagram, follow me on Facebook, Clay_share, Clay_share, or clayshare.com. Alright, that's it. That's all I got. I'm out.